take it away.
Greetings, guys. How you doing? Okay, so we have an amazing panel today. To my left, we have Darin from L'Oreal. We have Alan Mock from public school. And this is Lucy. She runs everything Stephen Allen. And Michele, Varian, my partner and co-moderator. First, I want to talk a little bit about Guesst. I'm going to ask around the hands, does anybody know about Guesst yet? Anybody heard about Guesst? Anything? Okay. All right, so I'm going to take you through a quick journey. Give me like 2 minutes. My background is in experiential marketing and hospitality. I worked in the music business for 5-10 years for a guy named Clive Davis. And my job there was to actually activate space. 10 city tours, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, and actually activate space. And you'll understand the story when I bring it home. So doing and maximizing commercial space was something that was part of my core DNA. Fast forward, after I moved out of the music business, got into commercial real estate, worked at brokerage houses. First one, Marcus Millichap. The next one was Eastern Consolidated. Noticed, as a tenant rep, spoke to, say, a couple hundred tenants a week. First thing, guys, would you like to expand your real estate footprint? No. Help us actually generate more revenue right where we are. So I said, wow, this is interesting. I don't understand where this market is going, disparity between the landlords that want 10-year leases and the tenants that can only afford maybe a pop-up. And so I went back to the lab 3 years ago and said, let's figure this out. Let's figure out how to help the tenants survive in this space. And so I started doing what we call connecting retailers or retail roommates in a space or guest shops. And as I was perfecting this and doing these case studies, I found that I'd say 70-80% of them were successful, but they were short-term deals, say 6 month, a year term. And those of you that know that's a broker, there's not a lot of commissions there. However, I know that if we could build a marketplace for them where they could discover each other, then we could scale. So that's Guesst. And then I partnered with my dear friend, Michele Varian here, who happened to be doing guest shops in her location. So I'll let Michele take it from here. Go ahead, Michele.
Right. So Jay and I actually grew up together, so we had a deep history.
Is it on?
Is it on now? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Jay and I grew up together, so we have a deep history, understood each other. We'd actually already, we reconnected because I was offering people to open guest shops within my Soho shop, because I have a very large shop. And a lot of my neighborhood retailers were losing their leases due to rent increases. And they were a big part of what made Soho interesting and desirable. They were the independent emerging brands, the people doing things that, why do you come to New York to shop? You come to find things you can't find anywhere else. And so I began inviting them in to take over portions of my store. And so we really, kept trying different formulas, et cetera. I had previously been one of the first shop-in-shops at ABC, in 2008 when the recession hit. I had been already selling to them wholesale because I design and manufacture my own collections of home goods, and had opened my retail store in Soho after 9/11, sort of like, oh, nobody's coming to New York to shop, I'll just open my own store. So after having sold to Neiman Marcus and Barney's, I opened my own store and gradually grew. And then '08 happened, and ABC invited me in. And that was actually a really interesting experience. I learned a great deal. I learned what was great about it, being close to other brands that made sense and elevated my brand. Having the established foot traffic that ABC had and the visibility was invaluable. However, operating kind of on our own but not on our own was very challenging. And so when I began hosting other shops in my shop in order to keep my neighborhood interesting, we kept trying different models. And then when Jay and I reconnected, he had some people, he's like, well, would you like to have them in your shop? And, well, not really good fits, but it really contributed us to us building the model.
Yeah, it was more of a case study. We were trying it out just to see what matches work. And then we connected with our partners over there, Alex Lipkin and Edward. They built technology, and I said, let's start building a marketplace where existing retailers can find complementary brands to license space in their location. So similar to the department store model with the consignment model, right? However, now they license a rack in the space, or they license a table. You guys may be familiar with like the market at Macy's and some of these other concepts that have come up. And that's the platform. We essentially have launched 5 stores here in New York, and we're going to get into the panel now because they're going to get into it. We'll talk a little more about it. So Darin Vest, I have one real question for you, because I asked you this about a year ago, and I said, how does L'Oreal, this large portfolio, uncover new brands, and why? Like, I know that NYX was something that you guys acquired, and I was wondering, you know, from your perspective, what were the characteristics behind that deal?
So we can talk about the NYX deal specifically. NYX was the Women's Wear Daily Brand of the Year in 2013. Exciting brand. We acquired them. They were just a wholesaler, and so they didn't have any freestanding stores. And we basically, you can either acquire a brand for a offensive reason or a defensive reason, or to create a capability that you don't have. I think what L'Oreal wanted to do was have a capability in a area of the market that they didn't. And so we wanted to compete in a color cosmetics brand at a mass market market position. You know, I think NYX is a brand that didn't have had an e-com platform, and a lot of their e-com customer base was sort of rabid, young, passionate cosmetics users. They didn't have freestanding stores, and they had strong wholesale. So they kind of had 2 of the 3 legs of the stool.
I see.
And so we acquired them and decided we would add the 3rd leg of the stool, which was the freestanding stores.
The freestanding. Okay.
So, you know, that was the story around NYX. I think when you look at a brand like NYX, you got to figure out what their strength is, what they add to your portfolio, and then how you're going to get them into the other areas of distribution that they don't have. And I think one of those areas of distribution is freestanding stores.
I see.
And the freestanding stores, once you know that they need to be in brick and mortar, the question is, how do you get there? And how do you do it efficiently? And I think that's one of the places where, you know, brands like Guesst come into play today.
Okay, that's great. Great answers. Thanks, Darin.
And also, I mean, one of the things that you guys got from NYX, because obviously we know what NYX got from being bought by L'Oreal.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you guys got had a great deal to do with their online following, their social media.
Yeah, they were great, and we picked that up, and we've you know, worked with that, and we know that as we opened freestanding stores for them, sort of helped with launching the freestanding store business and the interest in the freestanding store business.
So essentially, it went from clicks to bricks.
You go from clicks to bricks, or you
And then
go
you
from bricks to clicks.
to clicks, in the way.
You know,
the
it's
halo
either way. You
effect.
just know today you got to play in all of those areas.
All those areas, right. Okay, great. Darin, Alan, how you doing, bud?
Great.
Good, good. So Alan owns a brand called Public School. Who's familiar with Public School? Anybody here? Okay, some people here. You see that, Alan? That's great. So Alan and I was talking a while back, I say almost a year ago, and he was letting me know that they were pulling, was it 200 wholesale accounts? They were pulling away from 200 wholesale accounts. And then at the time, when he said it to me, I scratched my head, and he said it was 90% of their revenue. And I said, Alan, help me understand this. You're pulling away from 200 accounts, is 90% of your revenue. So what's the plan going forward? And so I'm gonna let him finish this conversation. I said, go ahead.
Yeah, for us, what we thought about was, here we are in a whole bunch of retailers.
I think you have to go closer to the mic.
Here we are in a bunch of retailers. These are the best retailers in the world. Folks like Barney's, Bergdorf, Saks, Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus. Runs the gamut as to the who's who of retail. And one of the things that we saw was, all these guys are great. They tell the public school story. They're good retailers. But one of the things that we saw with all of these retailers was that they all tell the public school story in slightly different ways. And none of the ways that they were telling it were necessarily bad. They were just a little bit different. For a brand like us, we're considered a brand with cultural relevancy and cultural currency. And really what that means is people come to us for a very specific story, for a very specific message about who we are as a brand. And for us to have our story told through the lens of these different retailers is troublesome because, like I said, each one is telling a slightly different story. So for us as a brand, we have a very pure belief as to what our brand stands for and who we are and the type of message that we're trying to convey to people. And we just didn't find that we were able to do that through the lens of all of these different retailers. So we were kicking around this idea for a good part of 2 years or so to really think about how do we go about telling our brand story. And really what it boiled down to was we need to exit these wholesale retail relationships and move towards a direct-to-consumer model where we can actually speak directly to the customer. Show them the imagery that we want to show them, tell them the stories that we want to tell them, have the conversations that we want to have. And I think a lot of people can really understand when you walk into a department store, you see a brand and you also see the brands that it sits next to. And really what that does is those adjacencies within a department store, they help to influence and indicate what you stand for as a brand. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. And even when I say that, sometimes it's not a matter of good or bad. It's just whether it's appropriate as to what we want to tell as an overall story. So we just thought, well, we just have to take control of this. And what that came down to was us relaunching our website as our platform for how we were going to engage with customers, really changing the way that we actually communicate. And also, right now, we've established a long-term pop-up space down in Soho, over on Howard Street, actually down the street from Michele.
We're neighbors now.
We're neighbors now. And that's really the way that we've been approaching this. And we just think that brick and mortar is something that is extremely valuable, and we don't deny that brick and mortar is valuable. And I think oftentimes when people think about brick and mortar versus e-commerce, people think, oh, well, brick and mortar is dying. We actually don't believe that at all. We just think that brick and mortar in its current state is troublesome, and we have to all think about how we're going to approach brick and mortar and how can actually leverage that space. For our space, it's really about having different activations within our Howard Street space. We have a constant rotation of different activations, constant rotation of product to really keep it exciting and really make this space something that's experiential rather than just a place where people come in, touch a shirt, touch a pair of pants, pay us, walk out with it. Hopefully pay us, I should say. But, that's kind of the goal here, is to really be able to get people to experience who we are as a brand.
Right, and to add to Alan's point, he called about a month ago and he said, Jay, we have this pop-up space on Howard Street. Is it possible for you to help us furnish this space through some of the D2C brands that you guys have on your platform? And I said, oh yeah, we can do that. And so that leads us into this question for Lucy. Lucy, can you tell the audience how we met and what's happened with your space at Stephen Allen?
Yeah. So essentially,
We'll get it right.
Stephen Allen, and this has been obviously super. If you work there, it feels like it's been a little over-reported, but there's been a ton of press over the past year just about how our business has been in a state of flux. We've totally kind of transformed what we thought we were doing because it just wasn't working for us. We had over 20 stores a year ago, and now we have 3. So we did some major downsizing, and we were just finding, similar to what Alan was saying, that wholesale really wasn't working for us. It wasn't as huge of a part of our business, but there were just a lot of kind of different things with the way we were doing our production, the way that we were manufacturing our product. It was just, there was so much kind of that wasn't working for us that we really took a step back and just sort of like needed to examine like where the best places for us to get revenue were going to be, what worked, what didn't work. And it turns out that, 20 of the stores that we had really, we didn't feel like were working for us. And in order to kind of stay in business, we had to seriously sort of, cut and run, for lack of a better example. Yeah, consolidate. Yeah, consolidate. It's much better. And I guess we probably met over a year. It was about a year ago, I think. Yeah, it was about a year ago that we started this. And Michele and Jay came to us with this, idea that they had that was about Guesst and kind of ways. And I think you had been doing it with Melissa Joy Manning. Or
right.
You've been
so
doing
I'd had shops in my store already. And much like Michele Varian, where I have my own brand and also host other brands in my store, over 100, so too Steve and Alan.
Right.
And so I think you guys were having some of the same issues that I was having, is that as a platform that really tries to bring innovators into the marketplace, so many of those were, where the internet has really disrupted conventional wholesale and retail is less about people purchasing everything online, but because so many D2C brands thought they would only sell online, and they didn't build in a margin to support wholesale. And so I was constantly approached by amazing brands that I wanted to have in my store, so too Steve and Alan. And a conventional wholesale markup is at least 50%. And the more expensive the goods, the higher the margin generally, because the turnover is less and you spend more in promoting it, et cetera, romancing it. And so I would have amazing brands come to me, and where conventional wholesale is at least 50%, they would say, well, we don't really have a wholesale margin, but maybe we give you 10%, but we'd love to be in your store. And I'd say, thank you very much. That's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And so, more and more that was happening. And it's like the best brands you couldn't work with. And yet you wanted to have a dynamic and creative, store that people got excited about.
Right. And so we started down this journey. We went in, we took the due diligence on the space. Our team over there goes in, takes a look at the space, sees the opportunity. Lucy and Steven are like, okay, these racks, these bays, these tables, we can now put a price to them on our platform. So here we go. Okay. This is Steve and Allen's Upper West Side location. All right. Everything looks the same, right? As probably it looked. Well, it's a little different. It's more home design.
Well, good stores change all the time.
Yeah. The merchandising changes. However, everything relatively is still the same, except the economics on the back end. So, for instance, that bay there could have gone as consignment, which could be the goods that never move. However, now we minimize our risk because we get a licensing fee up front, and then they do a rev share on our POS system. Okay, so for instance, I'll look at this bay here that says Graf Lance, say it's $2,500 a month. That's paid to us. The retailer gets it, retains that license fee. 5% goes over for sales. Now, I'm going to show you something that I feel is very interesting about Guesst. We have dynamic and flexible pricing. So, for instance, at the end of the month, Graf Lance, say they netted another $2,500. They could actually go on our platform and go into the Guesst messaging and send a message to the retailer and say, listen, this is what the numbers were. Is it okay if we do, instead of a 5% rev share, how about I give you $1,000 a month and give you a 30% rev share? Because I want to stay here. So, and that's something that I learned a while when I said, Women's Wear Daily did an article on us, and they said that we were the alternative to pop-ups and permanent stores. And when I saw that, I said, no, pop shares can be permanent because it keeps everybody honest. Everybody knows it's truly transparent. We know what the numbers are. You should be able to go in and set a new price that works for everyone so everyone can stay in space. So That's happening here now currently. These are all current brands in the space.
And it ends up maximizing everybody's real strengths. So the retailer is providing established foot traffic. They curate the space still. They select the product that's going to be in the store and the brands. And then they provide the retail staff. These pop-ups have to, train and staff temporary spaces over and over again. How do you get a staff that really knows what they're doing? Well, we go into existing retailers because they have staff and they have established foot traffic. And so the brand capitalizes on that, and then the retailer capitalizes on all the traffic the brand is now vested in driving to their store, because the brand still owns the product. They still want it to sell. They haven't dropped it off and gotten paid already.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback on that, the synergistic approach has been super crucial for us, and just kind of ensuring that the brands are all really, really bought in. And I think that means, to Jay's point as well, that we're utilizing kind of different models in terms of pricing strategy for all the different brands and all the different spaces, because obviously what works for one brand isn't going to work for another brand. And if we feel super strongly one way or the other about something, we're going to want to flex it so that everybody's kind of best interest is being looked after. And I think that that's something that the brands have really responded to. And they're also looking at it from a customer acquisition standpoint. So, okay, they're paying X amount of dollars per month, but if they're usually budgeting whatever for customer acquisition and they get 100 new customers, then they've saved a ton of money just from being in the store that they would have used otherwise for that, because they're getting this cross kind of promotion with the customers.
I'm gonna give you another example. I'm gonna tell a true story here with Steven. So this brand is called Grant Stone here, right? And so this is two models. The reason brands go in, of course, is to turn that revenue over to make the money the next month. And so we also knew that there were going to be brands similar that want to do R&D, right, to test other markets. The D2C brands, this Grant Stone line, wasn't selling. So this is a red flag for everybody, right? We're like, what's going on? Steve was like, how are they not selling any shoes? We don't understand what's going on. So Steven calls me and he said, Jay, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? So he talked to Wyatt. He said, Wyatt was like, I don't care. Our e-commerce business in New York is going out the roof. We got people hitting our platform, and we don't have any other advertising or anything going on. This is the only thing that he has a presence in. And so he's seeing the bricks to clicks halo effect really, really working for him. So I think, and that's just something that's happening organic, these case studies that we're noticing from our platform.
Yeah, and certainly going off of that, that's one of the things that we believe, and that's why we felt that having a true brick and mortar experience was actually really, really important for us as a brand, because we're big believers that brick and mortar is something that does create halo, that ultimately will drive traffic to web channels and ultimately increase sales for everybody.
Yeah, I think we have a bunch of different brands. We have brands that are in the fragrance space and have 4 stores. We have Kiehl's that has 80 stores in the U.S. We have Salon Centric that has about 550 stores, and it's a business-to-business play. And they're selling salon products to licensed beauticians. And I think Guesst, I think, is a very interesting model for how a brand can choose to go into brick and mortar expression. And I think we see all over the place from a lot of different players across the retail space, people making it easier for brands that don't necessarily have a retail capability to go into brick and mortar. And I think so. You see an example of Neighborhood Goods, which is shown out here. Very smart people, Mark Macinter and those guys that have put that together. I think that's kind of a WeWork model to they're going to take space and then find tenants and put them into the space. I think you see Simon Malls doing it with the Edit, where they're kind of doing the same thing, filling vacancy by putting a space together that makes it easy for international tenants to come into the marketplace. Macy's on the department store side, as well as Bloomingdale's and others are doing the similar thing, the Market at Macy's. So, I think there's lots of ways that you as a retailer that wants to move into a market or wants to test a market can start to do that, and it's obviously this retail as a service concept. We're going to do it for you. I think what's interesting about Guesst is that they're not trying to recreate space. They're using existing tenant space, and they're using the retailers that are responsible for that space to put together a group of tenants in their space that's synergistic, that makes sense, that's curated on some level. And I think that's part of what as a retailer we try to consider. What's your brand adjacency? What's your marketing position? And does the place that your product is going to end up landing, does it make sense for the business, for the branding of your business? And is it brand accretive or is it brand dilutive on some level because you're not getting kind of the treatment or the locations or the relevance to other brands that accelerate your brand. So I think that's one of the challenges that some of the solutions have out there. I think one of the things that Guesst has going for it is that it actually is a curation platform that puts brands in the right location and the right with the right adjacencies.
Matchmakers and also management. We learned that we're accounts receivable now as well. So
we
similar
addressed
to
a lot of
rent
the
rolls.
pain points for the
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
Who likes asking their unemployed roommate for the rent? It's like you've got an industry in stress, and we've figured out a lot of the ways to make the relationships between the retailers and brands much more clean and simple. And we do the parts that nobody really wants to do, and have really streamlined a lot of the processes that tend to be a little bit different with everybody, and so we're making that much more uniform, and I think that will continue to become even more streamlined as we learn and grow.
Correct. So, question for the panelists. We're in 2018, basically 2019. What are your predictions? Any predictions for retail coming up? Like the seismic shifts that have occurred? Any predictions?
I think we're just at the start of a sort of an increased scale of change that's going to go on. If you look at the players in retail and in real estate are changing. I think companies like WeWork are driving a lot of it, but as the top occupier now in New York City, I think WeWork is changing the game, and you as a user of space now have a company that's a different landlord. It's not necessarily the entity that owns the building, but it's some operator, WeWorks or something else. Now I think the categories of retail are shifting, and so you have retail moving into office.
Right.
And I think that's going to be significant. I was just talking to some of the guys at Sweet Green. So,
right, Sweet Greens. Right.
Restaurant that's doing well. About 50% of their business now comes from their app, and one of their biggest areas of growth is putting outlets inside of offices and delivering to those outlets. So I think there's a lot of what we take for granted as who the players are and how it's working today.
Right.
That's going to change, and we're all trying to make decisions based on those old paradigms.
Yes.
And I think they're going to continue to evolve.
Okay. Great. Go ahead, Al.
Certainly it's going to be more and more experiential. I think retail is going to have to become a lot more fun, because I think part of the reason why people feel like retail is dying right now is because it's actually pretty boring and pretty stale. When you walk around to, whether it be department stores or even just, here in New York City, I think that we can all agree that there's nothing really exciting going on in retail. And I think, right now, the path of least resistance, the easiest way to shop in a non-exciting environment is online. So if you want retail and brick and mortar to succeed, you've got to make it something different and more special than sort of clicking around on a mouse or on your iPad. So I think more and more we're going to see retail become something that's experiential, something that creates community, something that is able to create allegiance to brands or to actual physical spaces. And just think that that's something that we're going to see more and more of, and we'll see how brands as well as existing retailers will navigate that space.
Great. Thank you.
I think we've heard so much recently, the past couple of years, there's been so much press about retail being in a terrible position and that it's dying and all that, and we've seen this emergence kind of brands that are disruptors and people who are really disrupting every kind of landscape. And my prediction is that we're probably going to end up seeing, we're going to start to see more companies coming out who are like more solution oriented. So, you know, the pendulum is going to swing, I think, away from the disruption kind of arena and more to like fixing, like we've identified there are issues and now it's time to kind of move forward. Everybody's sick of talking about all the problems that we know that we have.
Right.
And I think we'll see a lot of great ideas and new companies like Guesst coming out to kind of try and fix this.
So solution based.
That's what we talk about with Guesst all the time.
All the time.
Is that for once, yes, we are a sort of disruption, but it's coming from a place of creating solutions instead of breaking things. And so many of the digital platforms, you know, I worked with Amazon when they launched My Habit. I worked with One Kings Lane when they launched. I worked with Fab when they launched. And, you know, they were all coming in to try and do something, not so much to supplement what existed, but to actually take over what existed. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really important to look at why do we have retail? You know, what is the point of it? And let's not get too far away from it. And, you know, when you are selling commodities, you can buy that online all day long. But as soon as you want to convey how special something is, the quality, you know, what makes it different from everything else, you want to verify that in person. And so that's just not going to go away because that's not something you can really create online. And I think that we really have to look at what worked before that was excellent, and then what can we take from the new tools that we have and build something better. And people talk about millennials not having, you know, like we got to do this because this is what millennials like. This is what millennials like. This is what millennials like. Great. However, they're not making as much money as the previous generation either. And so they really do care about what they spend their money on. And they're less driven by a gimmick and just, you know, they really want to see what the quality is. And so not having brick and mortar for them is a big miss.
I think also on top of that, it's, you know, to know kind of where it's going is to see that if you consider all of the direct-to-consumer brands who just in the past year have launched major retail presence, Everlane, Parachute, you know, Snow Home,
Casper,
Koyana, Casper,
right.
They have recognized that this is, you know, human beings are tactile, they want experiences, they want community, and like Alan was saying, it definitely needs to be revamped. We have to figure out some other way to do it, but that kind of presence is always going to be valuable, and I think it'll continue to kind of morph and do whatever it's going to do, but I think it's always going to be important.
Great. I mean, it reminds me of our first conversations, Michele, where we'd walk down Soho and we were like, wait a minute, where are the storefronts? And essentially, if we don't start caring about storefronts, and I was talking to some people about this yesterday, that the storefronts and the retailers are truly New Yorkers' amenities. Those are the amenities in the neighborhood. So we have to like start, you know, trying to fix that issue so we can build robust communities again.
And keep the existing retailers in their spaces besides just trying to fill spaces.
Correct.
We have to address both.
Right. And then there's the third part, which is the landlord, right? So we're talking to a lot of groups, and we say, and they say, well, you guys are just for the tenants and just for the brands. I said, no, you're not hearing us. We collect the data. We know who's successful. So we could actually tell you in almost a form of, I won't call it an incubator, but we know who's doing well in this area. We get the R&D, the data. So essentially, pop share could turn into a permanent in that market, right? And so I tell all the landlords, you need to get closer to your tenants, understand them, maybe utilize Guesst as a toolkit, and then find out and uncover best kept secrets that are there inside these retailers. So essentially, that's the conversation for the landlord, the tenant, and the brand.
Should we open it up for any questions from anybody?
Oh yeah, anybody? Questions on Guesst? So who understands Guesst now? Raise a hand. Yeah? Yeah, everybody? Okay, good, good. Any questions? Okay.
What sort of footprint are you looking for in a property? Like, I'm from DC and I represent a builder that has spaces as small as 1,500 feet and as large as 11,000 square feet.
Okay.
In between. So what sort of footprint are you looking for to create a co-tenancy suite?
Well, yeah, we like to say licensing, yeah. But
You'll have to repeat what he said.
He said, what kind of footprint is
oh,
Guesst
you
looking
didn't
for?
hear him. He said, what kind of footprint are we looking for? Is it square feet? Is it 1,500? Is it 10,000? And for us, it could start at 1,500. It can go to 10,000. But remember, it's essentially we're essentially a platform that connects the retail host. So the retail host is going to look at his space. He's going to say, okay, this season, you know what? I think I would like to rent out and test this product with 500 square feet in my current location. And then that's how we evolve with that. So they get a chance to hand select the areas in the space, put it together, put a listing together. We send it out. The brands opt in. If they're interested, he gets to swipe left or swipe right and invite them in. So it all depends. We have big box retailers that want us to take 10,000 square feet and activate it. Then we also have other ones that are 1,000 to 2,000 square feet in range.
Your target audience is repurposing underperforming retailers.
No, not underperforming.
Repeat the question, Jane.
Yeah, he said our focus is it repurposing underperforming retailers. No, we like to look at it as you now, as a retailer, have the power to create more value. So, for instance, the reason why the market at Macy's, they were underperforming in certain ways. However, they created a platform called the Market at Macy's because they saw that as a revenue driver, right? And so you could be anyone that says, all right, I want to increase my revenue. I want my stock price to go up, whatever it is. You look at our model and say, wow, this makes sense. This adds value to our bottom line. So that doesn't have to be anybody underperforming. That's just business.
How do you manage the branding on the storefront with the name of the various tenants?
This is it. It was up there.
Well,
So-
the retailer is still the retailer. And so in the store, all of the brands, because they're buying in, are fully branded, which as a multi-brand retailer, in addition to selling my own goods, one of the big issues with every brand having their own website is that there's no you don't know that they're going to buy it from you even though they discovered it with you. So basically, multi-brand retailers have become progressively more and more PR companies for emerging brands. And so here they've paid in. So now we're very happy to put their name associated with their brand, with directions to their website, et cetera. We might have promotion cards that customers can walk away with. All of these things, because we really do want the brands to be successful, but it's still underneath the retail umbrella because the retailer is still the curator.
Very important point is that there has to be curated properly. And we're seeing a lot of we work for retail collectives. They're all over now, right? And we recognize that, and we walked into a bunch of them, and we realized that's going to be the missing piece, the curation. It's very vital.
So we're going to capitalize on
story.
what retailers do well.
Right. Right. And tell more compelling stories, we feel.
Are you guys focusing more on New York City, urban areas, or even
We're starting in New York because we're basically still in beta regarding, our early relationships are with people we're very close to, who we can monitor and really learn from and perfect our technology and platform. But our next wave, our retail partners that we're selecting are mostly retailers that have a presence in New York, but have locations around the country. One of them also has a location in Canada for the first ones that we're targeting for the next round for first quarter. But we're gonna, we'll roll it out in waves because we want to make sure that we're learning and executing well. We want to deliver.
Yeah. We want to really create the right relationships between the brands and the retailer. We recognize that wholesale model has a lot of people like Alan walking away from it. He walked away from like 200 accounts because he just felt he wasn't getting, they weren't getting their data. They didn't know what the brand adjacencies were. The communication was off. So we want to make sure that we bring that together.
I mean, there's all kinds of ways of growth and scaling, et cetera. I mean, if everything goes well, we could be ginormous.
No, that's what, we're talking to a lot of players like that, but only from a consulting perspective, because we don't want to be in the way of our current competition. We don't
We're
want to be
getting the
competition
nod. We have
with
to
our
wrap it up.
retailers. All right?
We have to wrap it up.
Okay.
So just want to thank you all so much. Great conversation. I know everybody really enjoyed learning about this future of retail. So big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. And then we hope you'll come back tomorrow. Our next session will be at 11 a.m.